Since humans first began to farm about 10,000 years ago, the Earth's landscape has constantly changed as economic activities have evolved. For thousands of years, agricultural practices were most responsible for the transformation of land areas. Then, in the late 18th century, less than 300 years ago, another economic development, industrialization, began to reconfigure the landscape in dramatic ways. In the United States, we very rarely see farms or forests anywhere. The growth of cities is one consequence of industrialization, the process by which economic activities have evolved from producing basic, primary goods to using factories for the mass production of goods for consumption. England was the first country to become industrialized through a series of innovations and transitions known as the Industrial Revolution. The process of Industrial Revolution began in the late 18th century. It was basically the transition from an agricultural economy to a more mechanized urban economy. It occurred through the innovation of new manufacturing processes, most notably the development of the steam engine and the shift from wood to coal as a primary energy source. Two theories explain differences in levels of economic development among countries. According to the modernization model, England was the first country to begin to develop its industry through the Industrial Revolution. Max Weber explained that the cultural environment of Western Europe favored change. Wealth was regarded as a sign of personal virtue, and the growing importance of individualism steadily replaced the traditional emphasis on kinship and community. Once started, the British model spread to other European nations and the United States. By extension, any country that wants its economy to grow should study the paths taken by industrialized nations, and logically they too can reap the benefits of industrialization. The modernization theory identifies tradition as the greatest barrier to economic development. In contrast to the modernization model, the dependency theory places the primary responsibility for poverty on rich nations. The dependency theory holds that economic development of many countries in the world is blocked by the fact that industrialized nations exploit them. Dependency theory is an outgrowth of Marxism, which emphasizes the exploitation of one social class by the other. Problems, then, cannot be solved by westernization, but must be addressed by establishing independence. Increasing developments in transportation and global communication have led to a phenomenon known as globalization. Globalization is basically the expansion of political, economic, and cultural processes of countries until they become global in scale and impact. This leads to space-time compression. Space-time compression is the reduction in the amount of time it takes to diffuse something to a distant place as a result of improved communications and transportation systems. Although situation and site factors are so important for understanding economic activities, globalization has altered their meaning so that positions of places in the global web is also crucial. For example, the role of agglomeration in local decisions has reached new dimensions as urban areas have grown larger and international contacts have increased. The relocation of the automobile industry from the northern United States to maquiladoras in Mexico in order to benefit from low-cost labor would not be possible without transportation facilities to markets. Without infrastructure and trade communications established between Mexico and the U.S., such as NAFTA, the maquiladoras would not be possible to operate. Site and situation factors are also important when understanding the location of industries. Situation factors have to do mainly with transportation, bringing raw materials or parts into a factory and shipping the final goods to consumers or retailers. The farther something has to be carried, the higher the cost, so a manufacturer tries to locate a factory as close as possible to both buyers and sellers. If the cost of transporting the finished product is higher than the cost of shipping raw materials, the industry is both gaining and should be located closer to the buyer. If the cost of transporting the finished product is less than the cost of shipping raw materials, the industry is bulk reducing and should be located closer to the seller. Site factors are particular to a geographic location and focus on varying costs of land, labor, and capital. Modern factories are located in suburban or rural areas and not in central cities where land costs are prohibitive for space necessary for production. The cost of labor is another consideration, especially for labor-intensive industries such as fiber spinning, weaving, or cutting and sewing of fabric into clothing. In 1909, German economic geographer Alfred Weber developed a model for the location of secondary industries. His least cost theory explains location of industries in terms of three site and situation factors. Transportation. The site of industry is partially based on the cost of moving raw materials to the factory and finished products to the market. Business owners look for least expensive transportation costs. Labor. The cost of labor is also taken into consideration, and cheap labor may allow an industry to make up for higher transportation costs. Agglomeration. If several industries cluster in one city, they can provide support by sharing talent, services, and facilities. Industrialization and population growth in both indices and LDCs have exacerbated global energy use problems. Fossil fuels, including coal, petroleum, and natural gas, are residues of plants and animals that were burned millions of years ago. When these substances are burned, they generally cannot be replaced because they take so long to form. The world faces an energy sustainability problem partly because the three fossil fuels, especially petroleum, are rapidly being depleted. Energy deposits that have been discovered are called proven reserves. These can be measured with reasonable accuracy. However, we don't know how many potential or undiscovered reserves there are. New deposits are being discovered each year, but petroleum is being consumed at a higher rate than it is being found, and world demand is increasing rapidly. The acceleration of industry in LDCs is putting even more pressure on the finite fossil fuel reserves. A major issue industrial development faces is the ability to sustain itself. Sustainable development basically states that people living today should not impair the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Irreparable harm to the environment would compromise the Earth's future. Many critics believe that the pace of economic development today is no longer sustainable. One way to practice sustainable development includes implementing government policies to restrict destruction of the environment and population growth. Another way to practice sustainable development is through the mitigation of the environment by cleaning up chemical spills, deacidifying lakes, and adding fish ladders to dams.